The demonstration vehicle is a 95 Ford Mustang is equipped with a strut tower brace. If your vehicle has a strut tower brace like this, it will need to be removed. The brace will be held on by 2 bolts back at the firewall and then the remaining bolts up on top of the tower. You'll also need to remove the throttle linkage located under the brace back near the firewall. You'll also need to remove the air inlet hose, which is connected to the throttle body with a hose clamp. You'll also need to disconnect all your vacuum hoses and electrical connections, including the battery. It's a good idea to mark all your hoses and connections so when you're putting it back together, you know where everything goes, because there will be a lot of them. For demonstration purposes and ease of viewing, we're going to be doing this out of the car. The next step is going to be removing the upper plenum. In this case, the upper plenum is held down with 6 bolts. There are 2 located in the front, 2 in the middle, and 2 around the back. Once you've removed the bolts, just lift the plenum up and out of the way. Set it off to the side somewhere so you won't trip over it. Now you can see here in the video the 2 fuel lines which have been cut. You do not need to cut or remove the fuel lines to do this, but you do need to move the fuel rails out of the way so you can get at the injectors. To do this, you're going to need to remove the 4 bolts holding down the fuel rails. There are 2 on each side located just underneath the rail. In this demonstration, we needed an 8mm socket to remove the bolts. Depending on your application, you may need a different size. Once you've removed the 4 bolts, set them off to the side, and you're ready to lift the fuel rail up and out of the way. You don't have to remove it completely. You can just set it up on top of the manifold. To do this, grasp the rail with one hand and injector with the other, and gently wiggle and lift on the fuel rails, and they'll pop off the top of each injector. Now in this instance, we only used 4 injectors. You'll have 4 or 6 or 8 depending on the application. But just lift the rail up and set it off to the side so you can get at the injectors. You don't need to move it far, just enough to be able to get the injectors out. Grasp the injector, wiggle a little, and pull up, and they should pop right out. It may be a little tight depending on how long they've been in there. Now you can wipe down the injector and clean it up, get all the grease and grime off of it, and we're ready to take the injector apart and put your new pieces on. The first thing you want to do is remove the pintle cap. The easiest way to do this is with a pair of side cutters. Place the side cutters underneath the lip of the cap and gently pry up. Now don't squeeze too hard with the side cutters. You don't want to cut into the tip of the injector. Just pry it up until you can get it up far enough that you can pull it off with your fingers. Now if you don't have a pair of side cutters, you can use a screwdriver or something like a screwdriver. Again, be careful not to dig into the injector, and obviously don't poke your finger. But just work your way around, prying up on the pintle cap. When you get it up far enough, then you'll be able to pull it off with your fingers. Be careful though, because obviously while you're doing this, the injector cap can fly off. Like that. And that's it, the cap is off. Once you've got the injector cap off, you want to take a pick, or if you have one, you could use a dental tool, or anything that's got a curved pointed end works best. Just place it up under the edge of the O-ring, like this. Lift up, and roll it off. Now if you don't have a pick, you can roll it off with your fingers usually, as long as it's not stuck on there if it's been dry and sitting there a long time. Then pull the spacer off, and you're ready to take the filter out. Now they sell special tools that you can use to remove the filter, but you don't have to have one. We used a number 10 sheet metal screw, about 3/4 inch long. You can use a pair of vice grips, or even a pair of pliers if that's all you've got. Preferably vice or vice grips. Tighten down, and then lock them into place. And take the injector, Place the end with the filter onto the tip of the screw and start to turn the screw into the injector. You'll feel it bite into the fuel filter. Wiggle it a little and it should pop right out. Now you're ready to put the new filter in. Take the filter, place it inside the injector with the crush ring facing out. Push it in lightly and then take a brass hammer, preferably a brass hammer. You don't want to bang up the end of the injector. And tap gently on the crush ring until you seat the filter down inside the injector. It may take you 10 or 12 cracks with a hammer. Make sure that it's seated all the way down. If you see a little lip like this, you want to tap it a few more times until it's flush with the end of the injector. Now you're ready to roll the new O-ring on the injector over top of that. Just take it and roll it on. Once it's on, flip the injector over. Take the new spacer, slide it on to the end of the injector. Take the second O-ring, roll it onto the tip of the injector. Now you're ready to put the pintle cap back on. We used a 12.9 millimeter socket. That's what we found fit best on here. You could also use a 6.10 millimeter. Either one will work. Just press it down into place and the pintle cap will snap on. If you don't have the right size socket, you can use your thumb. Just twist the pintle cap on as far as you can and just take your thumb and press firmly until it snaps into place. Once you're sure that it's on all the way, you're ready to reinstall the injector back into the manifold. When you put the injector back into the manifold, you want to make sure that you put it back into the hole that it came out of. You don't want to put it in the wrong hole. We recommend that you do the injectors one at a time so you don't get them mixed up. Set it down in the hole of the manifold and then press down. Now you're probably not going to seat it all the way and it's going to be tight because of the new O-rings that's on there. Wiggle it a little bit and just seat it down in there until you're sure it's not going to fall out. Once you've done this for all the injectors, you're ready to put the fuel rail back on, but you don't want the fuel rail to bump it and knock the injectors out and onto the floor. So make sure it's seated down in there and take your fuel rail and begin to line the fuel rail up so it's positioned on top of each one of the corresponding injectors. Once you have the fuel rail seated back on top of the injectors, you'll press firmly on the top of the fuel rail. As you press down on the fuel rail, this will seat the injectors back into the manifold. If the injectors are all seated correctly, you'll be able to tell because the bolt holes for the fuel rails will be lined up with the bolt holes on the intake manifold. So once it seems like they're seated down okay, just check and make sure your holes lined up. If they're lined up, you're ready to put your bolts back in, tighten them down, and reassemble the rest of the pieces. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it helps you with reinstalling your new service fuel injectors. Thanks for watching.